It's my great pleasure to be able to introduce you to our keynote speaker for today, Yazmine Laroche. Yazmine Laroche, Dr. Yazmine Laroche, has been appointed Deputy Minister, Public Service Accessibility, effective August 7th, 2018. She has a whole bunch more in her bio, and she scratched it out on my page when I said, "What do you want?" And she said, "Just the top and the bottom." Ms. Laroche is the Deputy Minister Champion for Federal Employees with Disabilities. She is an alumni of Carleton University and the past chair of the Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Yazmine is going to speak with you today about her incredible work that she's done within the federal government and how that aligns with the work that we're doing in this room over the next couple of days. Welcome, Yazmine.
Hi everybody. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Est-ce que vous m'écoutez? Est-ce que ça marche? Oui? Ça fonctionne? Oui? Nods all around? Okay, good. Good. You never know, technology can do wonderful things for you. Sometimes it's not so great, as some of us know. I'm so delighted to be here, and I wanted to just wish you all a happy day after IDPD. This is an amazing week. There's so much going on. As Maureen said, this is probably the third time she's heard me already this week. And so I'm going to try and not repeat myself. I'm so glad to be here. I'm honored to be here. I'm a little bit intimidated to be here. You heard from Minister Qualtrough already, and you can see how committed and how passionate and ambitious she is. And she's kind of lucky. She's had 3 titles already doing this job. At the public service level, we tend to move a little more slowly. So I'm still the Deputy Minister for Public Service Accessibility, but I would like to say that disability inclusion is key to everything that we do. I really wanted to congratulate you on this strategy. You have done amazing work. And I know from our own experience in developing a strategy, it's a big undertaking. And I'm so keen to see where this is going to go and how our respective efforts contribute to our collective momentum, because there is a lot of momentum right now. I'm very interested in the parallels between our approaches. They both envision creating disability-confident and inclusive workplaces. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that and what we're doing to show leadership in the public service and creating those kinds of spaces. We both put a lot of emphasis on supporting and retaining employees. So we've heard about the continuum. It starts from recruitment. It starts before recruitment. It starts in the schools and showing people a path to meaningful and wonderful employment and getting people excited about work. So what has helped to set some of the conditions for culture change? The Accessible Canada Act. The minister spoke briefly about that. In 1 year, from June 2018 to June 2019, that act rocketed through Parliament and is now the law of the land. And we know that it has such potential to change the lives of people like us, people living with disability in this country, by eliminating barriers to our full participation in society, in our communities. It gives us the authority and the ability to work with Canadians with disabilities to create new accessibility standards and regulations that apply to workplaces in the federal jurisdiction. And that's a lot of workplaces, starting with us, the Government of Canada, the biggest employer in the country, including the banks, telecommunications companies, broadcasting organizations. Did I mention transportation, air and rail, and postal services right across the country? So that's kind of huge. And those regulations and standards, many of them are going to be created by the organization that the lovely Maureen is now she's on the board of the Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization. And these are going to be standards that are going to provide guidance not just to the federally regulated sectors, But we know that the provinces are already really interested. They're looking for leadership from the federal level as well. So think about what these standards are going to cover. Buildings and public spaces, information and communications technologies, other kinds of communications, employment, procurement, program and service design and delivery, and transportation. And that act, of course, calls for us, the public service, to lead by example by becoming a model of accessibility and inclusion for other organizations, which is where I come in and my team. As Maureen mentioned, I was appointed in August of 2018. A really simple mandate: get the public service and the Government of Canada ready for the implementation of the legislation. When I was with you last November, we were just starting our plan to assess the current state of accessibility in the government and to develop a strategy that would lead to our overarching vision, which is that we become the most accessible and inclusive public service in the world. Because one of the lessons learned in developing strategies is that you have to have a bold and ambitious vision. So the key to our work in advancing that vision was nothing without us. And I use that term very intentionally, and some of you will have heard me on this before. We think that the UN principle, nothing about us without us, is no longer valid. It was a great starting point, but when we are 22% of Canada's population, we have to start saying nothing without us, because everything is about us, because we are everywhere. We are everywhere in society, we are everywhere in community, and our vision is that we will be everywhere in employment and in positions of leadership. So we took this to heart, and like you, we embarked on a huge engagement initiative, workshops, town halls. I've been coast to coast to coast across this country, meeting in person with public servants with disabilities, with managers, with other public servants, with community groups, to learn as much as we could. Over that period, we've heard from 12,000 different individuals. And this is what we heard. Number one, we need a culture shift. We need to move from a culture where people with disabilities are seen as a problem that needs to be solved, to a place where the employer understands that it's our job to build an environment where everybody has the tools that they need to succeed and to thrive. We heard the importance of tackling head-on the challenges related to ignorance, to stigma, and to prejudices associated with disability, and particularly people living with less visible or non-visible disabilities. I heard so much about fear of disclosure, fear of repercussions and reprisals, fear of being considered a troublemaker if I ask for help. And related to that was frustration with what is key to anybody succeeding in the workplace, and that's accommodation. The accommodations process in the federal public service is unbelievably complicated. It is slow, and it's not consistent. It varies wherever you work and whomever you work for. And finally, and I thought this was really interesting because I think this is indicative of what happens when you're trying to achieve multiple objectives in a workplace. So we're moving to collaborative workspaces, open concept workspaces, and what we heard was that doesn't work for a lot of people. If you're dealing with some kind of acquired brain injury, if you're dealing with ADHD, this is a terrible work environment. And again, you need to avoid one-size-fits-all solutions. You need to start with universality of design, and then accommodation kicks in when you're trying to support an individual. And you need to do both. You need to be inclusive by design, and then you need to accommodate to meet individual needs. So let's tell to you a bit about our strategy and then some of our keys to implementation. So our strategy, not surprisingly, is called Nothing Without Us, and it was launched on May the 27th. And based on what we heard, it has 5 main goals. The first is all about employment. And again, it's that continuum from recruitment to retention, but also to promotion and development, because the evidence that we saw showed that we do a terrible job of recruiting, we're not doing a very good job of retaining, and people with disabilities in the federal government have the worst promotion rates of anybody else. So we need to focus on that. Second is the built environment. We have a variety of facilities right across this country in various stages of accessibility. So we know we need to work on that. Third, information and communications. So information communications technology needs to be usable by all. There was a Supreme Court decision, the Jodan decision, that required all of our external-facing websites to be accessible and all of our products for the public to be accessible. But somehow we didn't make the connection that our internal websites and products needed to be accessible. And so many of them aren't, and that's not a good thing. The fourth is equipping public servants to design and deliver accessible programs and services. How do you help people who want to do the right thing but don't know how to? What can we do to support others? So it's not just supporting people with disabilities, it's supporting everybody so that they can be disability confident and inclusive. And finally, building a culture of public service, a culture of accessibility confidence in the public service. So that's our roadmap. So that's our strategy. And as I said to our team, who were so happy and relieved when our strategy was unveiled, I said, okay, a strategy is great, but the most important thing is action. And so we're shifting gears now to implementation. And we're working with a lot of different departments leading on the strategy's various initiatives. So you asked me to discuss with you today the keys to successful implementation. So I wanted to share with you where we're at and give you some of our lessons learned that I hope will guide you as you go through your implementation. Make it real, make it easy. That is our motto for implementation phase. The strategy is beautiful, it's words on paper, it's something to live by. But we want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. Our strategy is ambitious, and that's intentional. And we know that it's going to take years of concerted effort to get the results we seek. So how do you start? I was at an International Labor Organization conference on the future of work, and I was on a panel with some amazing people. And one of them said something that really resonated to me. Don't boil the ocean. You cannot accomplish everything in your strategy overnight, so you need to prioritize and you need to sequence, which is what we're doing right now. We're focusing on the critical pieces that we think will help to advance our strategy based on evidence, what we found from analyzing the data, what we heard through consultations, and what we've heard from others who are innovating in this space. So on the employment front, we're doing a couple of things that I think are really going to help move. We've created something called a Centralized Enabling Workplace Fund. That's $10 million for us to invest in pilot projects, demonstration projects that are replicable and scalable across the public service that will make a difference in anything to do with workplace adjustments and accommodations. And one of the first things we've done out of that is a workplace accommodation passport. So you heard about our big challenges around uneven, complex, and slow. One passport, one document. It doesn't talk about what's wrong with me. It doesn't talk about my medical diagnosis. It says, here are the barriers I face, and this is what I need so that I can be successful. And I sign it, and my manager signs it on behalf of the employer, and it belongs to me, and it goes with me throughout my career. You tell once, you ask once. You don't have to relitigate every time you change jobs. So we are now in demonstration project phase with 6 partner departments to test it, because it has to be tested with real people so that we can learn from their experience. At the same time, we're developing a digital version, and our hope is that we will be rolling this out across the public service by fall of 2020. So I think, so again, focus, focus, focus on where you think you can make the biggest change. Of course, there are other things that we're doing that we are supportive of that. A catalog of the most frequently requested adaptive devices and a streamlined procurement process to get access to them. A centralized library of adaptive technologies for people who may not be permanent government employees, for example, summer students that we want to bring in, people who come in on a temporary basis so that they can get quick access. In addition to the fund on the employment side, the Public Service Commission has launched an internship program to bring in new people into the public service, working with them and with managers to learn what does it mean to create a welcoming workplace. And they're reviewing all of our current recruitment and our career development programs to ensure that they have a focus on people with disabilities. And this is how it's going to help us start to be prepared to meet the government's commitment to hire 5,000 new employees with disabilities by 2025. So on the accessibility of the built environment, it starts with an evaluation of 26 of our federally owned facilities. And it's not just a bunch of engineering firms coming in and seeing, is it to code? It's working with people with lived experience to say, but is it usable? Does it actually work for me? So I'm very proud of the work that PSPC is doing on that score. They've also created a procurement tool. So they've pre-qualified firms, not the usual suspects, that departments can tap into to do their own accessibility evaluations. On information and communications technology, really proud to say that we call it the triple ACT, the Accessible, Adaptive, and I always get this wrong, and Adaptive Communications Tools and Technologies Center at Shared Services Canada. They just got a lot of money in the budget to scale up. And these folks provide hands-on support to employees who need adaptation and adjustments, anything to do with ICT, but also to people looking to learn, how do I make accessible documents? How do I create an accessible PowerPoint? And they're making their tools available widely across the public service, and soon they're going to be on canada.ca. So they're going to be available to everybody, which is my third point. Don't feel like you have to start from scratch. You don't need to reinvent. There are already people doing great things. We need to have easier access to that. And I just want to highlight an event I was at on Monday, which I think shows tremendous promise. It was the launch of the Canadian Accessibility Network. And it was launched by Carleton University. And it is a network of post-secondary institutions, not-for-profit organizations working in the disability space, and some public service and private sector organizations. And it's precisely to do that, to help facilitate learning from the great work that people are already doing and making it easier for people to tap into that body of knowledge. The other thing I wanted to signal is what we're doing internally right now. Yesterday, the Chief Information Officer for Canada signaled that the government is going to be aligning with the 2018 Harmonized European Standard on Accessible Information Communications Technology. That's a game changer, because we are setting a really high standard now for all government departments and agencies to meet in acquiring and developing accessible ICT. When it comes to designing and delivering accessible programs and services, Service Canada has prepared an accessibility roadmap to help their department meet or exceed the requirements of the legislation. And it looks at how they can improve the accessibility of their services, including the built environment, staff awareness around accessibility, and how they communicate. And they're sharing this broadly across the public service. in terms of building an accessibility confident public service, it's the hardest piece, right? It's culture. Well, the Canada School of Public Service, which offers training on everything from project management, financial management, federal provincial negotiations, they're revising their entire curriculum to embed disability inclusion and accessibility into everything that they do. And they're also developing, they've got this Spotlight series focusing on accessibility, in-person training, tools, and webinars. The first one was on information and communications technology. This event had the second highest participation rate of any event ever put on by the Canada School. Do you know what number one was? An event with the Prime Minister of Canada. So we were number two. We had thousands and thousands of participants. So that's where it begins, that awareness raising, but also providing practical tools. I mentioned earlier our accessibility hub. We're creating a hub out of my office. If you have questions, you can speak to that woman right there, Stephanie Austin, because she's driving it. And it's a one-stop shop, an online tool, all things accessibility and inclusion. We're starting it in beta mode right now, so we can get feedback from people with lived experience. Our hope is that we're going to be able to move it from the internal to Government of Canada website also to canada.ca. Why? Because we want to make everything widely available. Like our passport, we want to make that available to everybody so that you can use it if you need it. So this hub is going to continue to evolve based on the feedback that we get. The final thing is storytelling. We need to do a better job of telling our stories. For culture change to happen, it has to resonate, right? People need to see beyond a strategy, a piece of legislation. They need to see the people who are attached to that, which is one of the reasons why we've started something called My Accessible GC. So these are videos spotlighting individuals either with disabilities working in the public service or people doing really interesting things around disability inclusion in the public service. And they'll be coming soon to a YouTube channel near you, so stay tuned for that. So those are some of the practical things that we're doing. And again, in the principle of trying to make it real. And we're going to keep going in terms of our engagement and our living the principle of nothing without us. It's about baking accessibility into everything that we do. This is maybe not the correct term, but it's mainstreaming it. It's so that disability inclusion isn't something that the HR department does or somebody does off of the side of their desk, but it is integrated into everything that we do. So it means being deliberate, and it means being intentional. It's not an afterthought. So we have this expression, inclusive by design, accessible by default. Well, I was at Microsoft office headquarters in Redmond, Washington, and I saw something wonderful on the wall of the lab where they designed their Xbox accessible controller, which is a thing of beauty. And by the way, the person leading the design team, Bryce, is Canadian from Toronto. Very proud of him. What it said on the wall, and this is what inspires all of the work they do. When you do not intentionally and deliberately include, you will unintentionally exclude. That says it all. So, I'm wrapping up now. I just want to say to you that, I'll have my cheat sheet here. Hang on. I think I lost my cheat sheet, so I'll just wrap. We are at a pivotal moment. There is momentum happening. You heard it from the minister. There's great momentum happening. And it's not just happening within the federal government and the public service, which I'm thrilled we have momentum. Look at you all in this room, and look at all of the amazing work that you are doing and have been working on in devising your strategy, and can think about the great work that we're going to continue to do together. And we need this. We need us working inside the government because we do the legislation, we are the biggest employer in the country, and we have to lead by example. But we need you. We need every person in this room doing what you do and pushing us and encouraging us and driving us so that we can meet the goal of being the most inclusive and accessible country in the world. Je suis très fière du travail que nous avons fait, mais je suis encore plus fière du travail que vous êtes en train de faire, et je suis fière de la belle collaboration que nous allons entreprendre, nous, ensemble. Alors, merci, et j'espère que vous allez avoir une excellente et merveilleuse discussion aujourd'hui. And thank you for letting me be with you.
Thank you.